Bob Miller has asked me to chair the meeting this morning because he's up hiking in the Sierra, where perhaps the rest of us should be as well this time of year. But let's get going. I want to, in honor of our two guests who were here ahead of time, which I really appreciate. So that takes a lot of anxiety off of everything. I am Bill Carney. I'm on the steering committee of the COG, the Climate Action Working Group of MCL, and a proud member of MCL, as I hope all of you are as well. So I'm going to be chairing the meeting today, and we have a really simple agenda, or straightforward agenda. We're going to be talking to our two new supervisors. And there'll be, after a discussion, we will open that up to a wider discussion of involving, asking for your questions and comments. Brief, we would request, or succinct, and feel free to put those in chat. I actually am kind of a fan of live comments as long as they're brief, or live questions. But I think the chat is a good function to alert everybody and make sure we don't miss anything. And also to rehearse, getting them into a form that you can deliver quickly. So then we'll do that. In the meantime, or unless you're speaking, please do keep yourself on mute. And I think that's it in the way. Oh, I said we are recording, and that'll be available on YouTube later on. And I think that's it. So again, welcome all, and welcome particularly to our two guests this morning. The two newest supervisors of the five members of the Board of Supervisors, Mary Sackett and Eric Lucan. Really appreciate you being here. I'll do just a quick summary, and you can fill in the blanks as you feel fit. But to introduce you, both Mary and Eric were elected last year, so they're getting used to what being a supervisor is all about, certainly, but they come with long experience. Mary represents District 1 in San Rafael, and Eric represents District 5 in Nevada. So in addition to having a countywide perspective, they represent portions of the largest two jurisdictions, local jurisdictions, or cities in Marin as well. Mary served for a long time as an aide to Damon Conley in the same district before he moved on up to Sacramento as a assembly person. And she's had an interest in climate all throughout that period, was instrumental in, and now sits on the board of Marin Can, and we'll hear a bit more about that, I'm sure. And also has a particular interest in housing, and we'll hear some about that in a bit too. Eric, and she's lived here for over 20 years, lived in Marin. Eric is a Marin native from Nevada, and has served for many years also, or previous to this role, served on the city council of Nevada and several times as mayor. And he has been particularly active in on the transportation front, and including as a longstanding board member of TAM and of SMART. So, and he also, on the private sector side, was chief marketing chair for Mike's Bikes. So he brings that dimension of transportation also. So that's it for me in terms of introductions. And again, welcome both Mary and Eric. So we're going to go through a number of questions, and just I'm going to ask the same question and ask each of the supervisors to respond in turn. So starting off, as a new supervisor, what are your prime priority actions to confront climate change, both to reduce its causes and also to address its impacts? And Eric, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Thank you, Bill, and thank you, everyone. Glad to join and participate this with my colleague, Supervisor Sackett. Priorities to confront climate change. I think at a very high level, we can very simply say, well, let's electrify everything and ensure that all of that electricity is coming from 100% renewable sources. Sounds so simple, right? But that really is one of my primary focuses, is looking at all the different areas. And I know we're going to talk through the different sectors of electrification, but transportation, housing, waste, all of those areas, as much as we can introduce electrification and continue on that trajectory, that is something that I'm heavily focused on. But then it's also important to make sure that we have the generation of this electricity is in fact coming from renewable sources. So it's a lot easier to say than actually do. How am I actually going to try to accomplish this? Number one, as a new supervisor, and certainly in my first 6 months now, trying to educate myself as much as I can and surround myself with all of the right people and all of the right experts that are far more experienced and far more, much smarter in this area than I am, and really lean on their expertise. And I see we've got some great experts on the call here, starting with our own county-owned Dana Armanino, my prior colleague at the City of Novato, Gretchen Schubeck, and many others. So really look to lean on you and to educate myself to continue on this great work. What else I hope to bring to the table to address some of these issues, coming from the City of Novato, having spent 11 years there on the City Council, is better coordination between the county and the cities. With 11 different cities and towns in Marin, and then the county, oftentimes we're putting forward initiatives at the county and hopeful that cities will join on, but many times we end up with 10, 11 different ordinances. Some adopt, some don't. How can we improve that collaboration? So that's something that I'm heavily focused on, and I think I can help contribute to, so that when the county comes up with a model ordinance, or another city that it's very hard to get unanimous agreement and everybody to adopt the exact same ordinance, but I think we can do a little bit better than we've done in the past, and hope to solve that. As Bill mentioned, definitely have a focus on transportation. And then just to wrap things up, the second part of this question is, how do you address the impacts of climate change? Unfortunately, what I think we're in a situation where we're constantly going to have a battle between interim fixes and ultimate fixes. And that's because the impacts are so great, the costs are so significant, and there's going to be a tendency to do more of a temporary fix for the impacts of climate change, when really what the community is going to want is that longer term fix, which tends to be much more expensive. And I think you see that playing out in many different places. Highway 37 is a great example of it. And you've got an interim solution and ultimate solution. I think we're going to see that time and time again when we look at addressing climate impacts. Well, do you want to do a short-term fix or an ultimate one? The ultimate one always costs more money, and the community is always going to be divided. So it's going to be a challenge. So I'll leave that as my opening remarks and turn it over to Supervisor Sackett.
Okay, thank you. And Mary, your priority actions for climate change.
Yeah, thank you so much for the question. And it's a pleasure to be here with all of you. I've learned so much from these COG meetings over the last 5 years. Think back to Doug Wilson, who told me at an early meeting, we can't all be experts in all areas. And I think when it comes to climate, that is something I always have to lead with. And especially when we talked about things like the CPUC, to just say, we can't all understand how all of those agencies work. So thank you for the opportunity to be here and to speak. My priorities when it comes to sustainability are creating affordable housing stock in our county. I think we can do it. We can do it well. We can do it in an environmentally conscious way along our corridors. And then enhancing the multimodal pathways so that those, so that our new housing for our workforce, for our teachers, it is something that, folks can walk to services, use our transportation system. So that's a huge priority of mine. Also really focusing on how do we look at the sea level rise adaptation planning and wrap our heads around how we're going to tackle that. And just, looking at today's headline of the cost and seeing agencies looking at this, but I'll talk about this a little bit more, but how do we bring multi-jurisdictions together on these issues? More specifically in District 1, as San Rafael that I represent, I'm really working and continuing to focus on the McGinnis Marsh restoration and hoping to partner that with a dredging project in Las Colinas Creek. So it's been on the books for a long time, but hoping to move that forward. And then the other initiative that I am spending more and more time on is microgrids. And I see Terry Thomas, we've had some discussions about the floating homes. It's not easy, but we do have, Supervisor Rodoni and I have a working group where we're just trying to make sure people are up to speed on what is a microgrid, where can we use it so that we can lay the groundwork when opportunities come up, we're ready. And I think when we look at new construction and as new housing is going in, ensuring that we're laying the proper foundation. And finally, considering environmental justice in every action that we take at the board to ensure that we are not, that we're helping our underserved communities and not putting any more impact on them. So that's kind of the underlying driver.
Okay. Thanks very much, and I'm glad you mentioned the headlines and held up the IGA this morning, because we're talking during a week that climate impacts globally, really around the country. In the Southwest, the heat, in the Northwest, Northeast, the rains, the smoke coming into the Midwest, and now rains there too, and flooding. We really have urgency is at our doorstep here. This issue is now front and center nationally. And I think an overall context of what we're talking about really is how do we utilize crisis moments like this to move forward on addressing not only the impacts, but also the real causes of this crisis. So that's a great context for this. Our second question zeroes in a little bit on, we've heard you've highlighted some of the opportunities that you see. What are the challenges that are confronting us that we need to overcome as you go about implementing some of the actions that you've mentioned on climate? And let's see, why don't we reverse order here and start with Mary?
Thank you. So I'm going to start with the opportunities and then get to the challenges. So I think one of the exciting pieces that we recently voted on in our June budget is to add to the county staff an active transportation planner. And that was an idea that came from Jean Severinghouse, a very active member of our community when it comes to transit. Kate Powers, who I see is here as well, really supported that. And how do we bring these interjurisdictional issues together so that we have a connected network of transportation at the transit level, at the walking level, at the biking level? We can have a great pathway, but if somebody has to navigate, 3rd and Heatherton, you've lost 3/4, if not 98% of the population because of those intersections. So I'm really excited that we're going to have somebody at the county level really trying to bring these pieces together and is, we've heard in the past, we're in a great new space where we have transportation and pathway networks. Now we just have to connect them. So I think that's a great opportunity that's coming forward. I think when we look at the challenges, is sustainable funding streams. We are in an era right now of unprecedented one-time funding from the federal government, from the state government coming out of the pandemic. And it's phenomenal, it's awesome, and there's a lot that we can do with one-time funding. But the real challenge is we can't, we always have to look at how are we going to maintain, how are we going to continue to staff or to support things. And I oftentimes am frustrated with these one-time funding streams that, say build housing for our unhoused folks. Here's a pot of money. You figure it out 5 years from now. So I think that's one of the bigger challenges. When it comes to climate, I also think there's a huge challenge, and hopefully an opportunity that Marin Can will step into and really lead. But we've got so many community-based organizations working on climate in this county. I think technical assistance is always a challenge, and grant writing, and just really having people lined up for when funding is available and having the resources to do it. We have a good model from that. I think Eric's going to talk about a little bit with where the county, CAM and others came together for some federal funding. But I think, really trying to tie people together so that we have that expertise. Somebody, as you all know, as simple as who's going to take the money and who's going to keep that money and hand it out. It can be a big challenge for some of our small nonprofits. So I think that that's a challenge that we collectively need to put some work into. And that was really one of the impetuses for creating Drawdown Marin, which became Marin Can. So I hope that we can continue to leverage that so that we're not competing against each other, but we're leveraging each other's best resources and then looking at the gaps in particular, I think, in that grant writing and grant funding space.
Okay, great. Eric, opportunities and challenges.
Yeah, just to add on what Mary spoke about, I think opportunities is really just being a more resource-rich area, and we have the political will here in Marin, which is really exciting. Being a supervisor for a county like Marin, where we're constantly an early adopter. I mean, we're an early adopter with community choice aggregation, early adopter with building electrification, EV adoption, all of these things that political will is here in Marin, and it will continue, which puts us at the forefront of a lot of these issues, which is really exciting. And also other opportunity would be the federal dollars that are now available. That historic funding that is there. It's just a matter of do we have the resources to go after it, to grab the money, to utilize it, to manage it as a smaller county. Challenges. I think cost is going to continue to be a challenge, especially as you talk about from an individual's perspective, not like a county-wide government, but you're talking about whether it's getting an EV as your next vehicle or building electrification, changing out, water heaters and heat pumps and all of those things. There's a cost associated with that. And certainly with the status of our financial markets, a lot of people might pay for those improvements through home equity line of credits, and just looking at the interest rates on those, I think we need to find other ways to make it affordable for individuals to make these improvements, to simplify the rebates that they can take advantage of. So I think cost is a big issue. Labor force is one that I'm concerned about looking into the future, as we're going to be continually encouraging individuals to make these improvements to their home and to go to electrify. Is there a qualified and available workforce that is going to make this seamless and easy for the homeowner, or is it going to be a point of frustration, at which point you might get backlash of, well, now you need to push back these deadlines because there's not a qualified workforce that can actually meet the oncoming demand. So that I see that as a challenge. but one that I think we can address, and it also creates higher paying jobs. So there's an opportunity in there. Last two challenges, equity in this space continues to be a significant challenge. How do we make sure that this is not just something available to the wealthier white homeowners and the rest of the community is kind of, doesn't have those same opportunities. So we really need to be looking through this with an equity lens in everything that we're doing, whether it's building electrification, EV adoption, making sure that it's available to everyone and not just a subset of our population. And then lastly, which I touched on a little bit earlier, is collaboration between cities, towns, counties, nonprofits. I think everybody wants to do more, but we also need to, we can go farther together. And, sometimes that might mean a local jurisdiction can't make all the little tweaks they want to make, but there's a greater good when we have some collaboration as a county, especially as a smaller county, and it makes it easier for the public to understand when we don't have sort of these different rules, different implementation dates and timelines for all of these things across all of our cities, towns, and counties.
Okay, thanks for that. And we're going to ask a couple of questions that really do zero in on some of the things that you brought up, some of the particular issues. So again, starting Eric with you on electrification, which you've just mentioned quite a bit, but are there additional ways of solving some of the challenges that you brought up? Or could you just delve into that a bit more deeply? This does represent about a third of Marin's emissions. So if we're able to, if we're able to address it, it will go a long way. And it is something that local government, in fact, can do a lot to address. So building electrification, and starting with Eric.
Yeah, I mean, so many different things to touch on here. I think, one of the challenges here is I do think there's some confusion out there with all of the different laws, the different dates, the different alphabet agencies. You've got CARB that is halting the sale of these small off-road engines, better known as SOARs, or your leaf blowers and your weed whackers and all of those things. So they're going to be halting the sale of that in 2024. Cities and towns have enacted their own rules, and they're really all across the board. So there's some confusion there. You've got BachMed's recent announcement that they're going to be ending the sale of gas water heaters and gas furnaces in 2026 and 2028. I think that presents a big challenge. I think it's great that we keep setting these aspirational goals, but we have a much older housing stock here in Marin, and I worry about the individuals that have 100 amp panels on their home. So when they go to actually make this improvement, they're not looking just at the replacement of to an electric water heater, but they're looking at having to upgrade their entire electrical panel. And if anybody's dealt with PG&E recently in trying to time the swapping out of a meter, my concern is that right now we have a lot of positive support for these initiatives, but we need to make sure that we're prepared for them. And I think that's where the local jurisdictions can step in to make it simple, to make the permitting easy, to educate the community, to educate the public. To get them thinking about, upgrading your panel now instead of waiting until your gas water heater fails and now you have to do it all at once. Do we have incentives? Do we have rebates? Do we have the workforce out there to do it? I don't have all of the answers around this, but I'm concerned about the challenge when somebody actually goes to make that replacement and find out that they're looking at an additional $10,000 charge to upgrade their 100 amp panel to a 200 amp panel. And I think that's where we could also look at better financing options to make it easier for homeowners. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done. I think it's these aspirational goals and these dates that we put out there are great, but at the same time, some of it falls on local jurisdictions to make sure that this, excuse me, that this can roll out seamlessly. But we've got an older housing stock here, and yeah, we can make significant impacts with some of these building electrification improvements.
Okay, great. And so Mary, where do we get the resources, and where do we how do we back up those efforts with ordinances?
Yeah, I think, I think to Supervisor Lucan's point, there's a lot out there. My question is always, how do we simplify that? How do we make it easier? And how do we frankly stack rebates so that they mean something? And I will share an experience that many of you may have, but we put in switched out our gas furnace for an electric heat pump, and it maybe took 18 months. We didn't qualify for, Bay Ren because we weren't replacing an air conditioner, even though it, was part of the new process. Ended up having to redo ductwork as well, and which wasn't considered. So I think we have to put the whole picture on the table for people to say, this is what you're looking at. These are all the things that could come up, because I think you lose people when they get halfway into a project and then see it double, triple in cost. At the county level, I think we always have to look at what are the fees that we're charging for anything. And I know there's some wonky examples out there. If you hear them, please let us know. But we want to make sure that, when people are doing the right thing, installing batteries, we aren't getting in the way of that. And I think that's an ever-going challenge, frankly, within permitting departments and so forth. So how do we at the board, and how do we as a county government make these things easier for our residents? I think we also have to take the laboring oar, frankly, and getting these projects into multifamily units. To expect one tenant to figure out how to create the grid and a place to charge vehicles is too much to ask. I think it's also a lot to ask of a landlord who may own, 4 units that doesn't live there and may not be thinking about these things. So I think there's an opportunity for county government to really help jumpstart and to continue the electrification transition in multifamily housing. And then there's a lot of nuances between those two things, right? So there's multifamily rental, multifamily ownership, floating homes that we have. Like, how do we provide county resources in order to jumpstart a lot of that work? One of the things I'm really excited about, just really learned about yesterday when Sebastian Kahn from MCE presented to the board, and they're doing a virtual power plant pilot in Richmond. And I'm really excited to see, one, that somebody's doing a pilot and to see what we can learn from that. Really connecting the Ohm Connect and the user demand with battery, with storage, and how we flatten the curve that way. I hope, that that's a success and we can learn from it and use it in some of our markets within our county. I think there's real potential to utilize the abundance of solar that we have in a better way. We do have the all electric ordinance within the county for new construction, and we have to make sure that that is, I think we still have a big education curve, even for new construction, to make sure that people understand the why. And this is you and I telling stories about how it, how it's a better situation, how it's better heat or better electricity. People really want to hear how this plays out in real life. Can you survive without a gas stove? If so, tell your friends. I feel like that's a conversation, that we can all have on a regular basis, because my sense is that the bulk of the population just isn't there yet. And so how can we, keep moving that forward? Little concerned about the Ninth Circuit decision, which, looked at Berkeley's all electric ordinance. I think that Marin will be okay, because we did make an exemption for commercial kitchens, and that litigation really arose out of the restaurant industry, but time will tell. Hopefully ours will stand because we do have a lot coming online. In District 1, we have, this Talus project and a couple of other projects. And, the good news is Talus moved slow enough. It's on Lucas Valley Road and Las Colinas. It moved slow enough that they, didn't get their permits in time to be exempted from the all electric ordinance. So I think that's exciting as well. So I'll leave it at that for a moment.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the depth of that discussion. And BACMed came up and their rules, which will be in the next 2 years and 4 years, that there won't be able to install gas furnaces or HVAC or water heaters. And I think, the county role in getting ready for that and assisting that transition and providing the support needed both from policy and from funding is an immense one. So I do want to switch to the area of emission-free mobility, and which of course accounts for over half of the emissions in Marin. So it really, that whole transportation realm is critical to reducing our greenhouse gas footprint. And Mary, if you could lead off on that, the detailed dimension of that huge issue. How do we get there?
Absolutely. I think you have the right two supervisors on this. I think Supervisor Lucan and I are both serve on SMART, serve on TAM, we're in transit, and very much excited about what we can do in the transportation sector and sort of thinking and living it every day. I think the most exciting thing that many of you may have heard about is that Marin Transit just got the biggest federal grant in the state of California, $31.5 million to transition to a zero emission fleet. They currently have 6 electric buses, but most of it runs on diesel. Charging infrastructure is no joke when it comes to these big buses and the hills of Marin. And it's a really, really exciting project. And I'm excited to see what happens. The other interesting part about this federal grant is it comes with a requirement on workforce development. So hopefully we will, some of these big questions about how do we upskill and train people to do this. This is an opportunity to incubate that and do that within the county. The other little nuance of this grant is that the project is going to have to encompass childcare in some way, which I think is fascinating, to really looking at the notion that bus drivers are on a schedule that's different than others. We're really struggling to get bus drivers. How do we accommodate childcare, which I know is a huge priority for both Supervisor Lucan and I, that it's part of our economy, and our economy doesn't work without childcare. So that's a really exciting piece. When it comes to SMART, we're really building out the pathway. We have construction planned for the McGinnis to Smith Branch Road segment and many other segments that are coming together to provide that alternative. And SMART's doing some exciting things. We've got a great director and team that are thinking outside of the box. So there was SMART train was provided after the fair and the fireworks, which was great, got a lot of use. Free youth passes over the summer. So really seeing some increased use of SMART from people, trying it, and kids getting out there, field trips for everybody. The Starlighter service, which is Friday and Saturday evenings. And yesterday, there was an announcement that there's a new pass for employees, a 31-day pass that really acknowledges that people are commuting 3 days a week rather than 5. So adjusting that price, you can still use it for 5 days, but acknowledging that people don't want to pay for 5 days, because the reality is many people are not going into the office 5 days. So I think there's a lot of potential, in addition to the awesome segments of our bike and pedestrian plan that are gonna give those who want to get out of their cars an opportunity to do so. And we just have to continue making that a part of the culture of Marin, which I don't think it has been for many years of it's okay to show up on transit. In fact, it's the right thing to do. I'll stop there.
Okay, and Eric, maybe you can address all that, but also fold in the those who stay in their cars, and what do we do on that front?
Yeah. I'll try to touch on a couple different things. First and foremost, we should all just ride bikes more often. That's the most efficient form of transportation, and you get some exercise doing it. But hard to do, and I mean, it's easy to do in Marin, but it's also hard just the way that we've built out our community, and we love our cars here in Marin. Fortunately, we have been an early adopter of EVs in Marin. We're one of the leading counties in EV adoption, and we still have a long way to go. I truly believe everybody's next car, not that you're going to go out and buy an EV right now, but whatever your next car ought to be, it should certainly be an EV, and certainly by 2035, it will have to be an EV here in California. We know the majority of the trips that everybody takes here in Marin. I was trying to find the exact stat because we looked at this at TAM. I want to say something like 30% of all trips taken are between 1 and 2 miles. So they're short trips. So we can continue to make some progress here. How do we get more EV adoption? We need to really address the equity issue and get EV charging infrastructure in and around multifamily, and ensure that it's there. Really excited that at the urging of Congressman Huffman, and a lot of collaboration between the county, Marin Clean Energy, TAM, City of Novato, City of San Rafael, that the county is taking the lead role in applying for a Department of Transportation grant around EV infrastructure. And this is sort of a two-step grant. The amount that we're asking for is about $500,000 with a local match that would be coming to that. If we get that $520,000, it would allow us to do some development of construction documents for 20 sites in 4 communities across Marin, which is going to be West Marin, Marin City, Novato, and San Rafael, with a focus on siting these locations closer to multifamily and really addressing some of that equity there. We've got a lot of charging infrastructure in single family homes now. We've got Tesla superchargers near shopping centers. And that's good, but it's not addressing really making charging available to the entire community. So hopeful on this grant. If we get it, it will allow us to do that preliminary work and then be able to go and maybe secure an even larger grant in the future to implement it. So that's really exciting. On the transit front, Supervisor Sackett talked about the money we got at Marin Transit, which is great. We currently have 6 electric buses in our fleet and looking to expand more and more. One of the things I've been focused on in this area and kind of look to you as some experts is we need to find a way to reduce the charging fees for our electric buses. Currently, we're paying between 70 cents and 85 cents per kilowatt hour to charge our buses. If any of you have electric vehicles you charge at home, that's 2 to 3 times what it costs to just charge your own vehicle. That's more expensive than if you plug into a Tesla supercharger at peak hours. So why is it that a public agency like Marin Transit has to pay so much per kilowatt hour to charge these buses? Some of it's just related to PG&E's rate structures and demand charges, but that's something we have to find a way to address. Because if we electrify our entire fleet and the end result is that it still costs more than when we were using diesel as a fuel option, that's going to be a difficult thing to continue to tell the community this is a good thing and let's continue on this trajectory. So we need to solve that. Something I've been focused on and trying to really get to the bottom of why that is. I'm going to wrap this up. I'll mention SMART very briefly. Supervisor Sackett touched on it. HARB also set some pretty ambitious goals around rail and locomotives that I think is set to go in place by 2035. Something we're monitoring at SMART. It doesn't necessarily apply to our commuter DMUs right now because those are meet the EPA's Tier 4 emission standards. But we are looking at are we using is there a biodiesel blend that we could use with our smart trains? I know I've heard the messaging that, smart, uses clean diesel. I really don't like that. I think it's a complete misnomer. There's really no such thing as clean diesel. Let's just call it what it is. They are diesel DMUs. They are Tier 4 standards, but can we find a biodiesel blend that is better than what we're currently using? And I know that's something on our maintenance division is continually looking into. And then just to leave you with one, let's dream big. I'm hopeful that we can electrify smart at some date in the future. And with the technology that's out there, with battery technology, I don't necessarily know if that means electrifying the actual rail line, but with a 2 or 3 car train system, I wonder if the technology is there to power it with battery, given that we're not going a very long distance. So just dreaming big here. It might be many, many years or decades away, but I think smart can be an early adopter to go after those dollars.
Okay, thank you. So the last of our deep dive issues on greenhouse gas reduction is zero waste. It accounts for 5% of Marin's emissions, relatively small, but it is something that all jurisdictions are now facing, having to deal with. And I think maybe, yeah, Eric, you're leading off on that one.
I'll go quick on this one. I'll let Mary address this more. Sorry to just hand that one off. I think with zero waste, continuing to get into the schools and train the next generation is key, and it's been very successful. My 4.5-year-old tells me what goes in what bin, and he's more vigilant about it than I am. And I think that's phenomenal that even at a young age, our youth are learning this and continually teaching us. So I think that's where we continue to make an impact. One little nuance with zero waste that I think is unique to District 5 and Novato, which is something I experienced while on the city council, is the city of Novato doesn't actually control the waste hauling agreement in the city. It's managed by the sanitary district. It's one of those unique situations across the state. And what makes it a little wrinkle is a lot of the diversion goals, the incentives, the penalties are being placed on cities and towns to meet these goals. But in Novato, they don't actually have those levers to pull to see an impact in the community. Yes, it's done through collaboration. There's good partnership with the Novato Sanitary District, but I just bring it to your attention because it's a little wrinkle that I think makes it not unsolvable, but maybe just a little more complicated in District 5 to get to those zero waste goals. With that, I'll turn it over to Supervisor Sackett.
Okay.
Thank you very much. So I think we've got a lot of good stories in Marin on zero waste, and then we've got a lot of room to grow. So first and foremost, the big elephant in the room, thanks to Bell Cole and Bill and many others, is the biomass project. And I don't know about you all, but 5-10 years ago, I didn't even realize this was a problem. And this was a project that trickled up through Drawdown Marin and Marin Can of bringing the right people in the room as we were looking at, the wildfire protection ordinance to go, holy moly, we're cutting down a lot of vegetation and it's going to the landfill. Well, what can we do about that? So I really appreciate the leadership of so many of you on this group and taking lead within the state, getting that OPR grant, and hopefully we'll start to find some solutions. I was out on a wildfire visit up in Storage Park a couple weeks ago and just really talking about, how this biomass recovery has to be local. It has to be hyper local. Napa County's doing some things. So really, I think it's just a huge part of our waste stream that if we don't do right, it will continue to go terribly wrong. I've been a part of Clean Marin for a long time, which comes out of the stormwater pollution program. McStop. Really looking at litter cleanups. Everybody's done them. They're great. We can't do all the litter cleanups, even if we all went out all day long. So really excited that the reusable foodware ordinance is moving forward. All the jurisdictions have adopted that, the county and all the other jurisdictions except for Belvedere and Corte Madera. And hopefully they'll get there in the near future. That will start to be enforced in November. And I was happy to see the city of San Rafael, newsletter this week saying, Magnolia Park Kitchen is leading, the owner there is owning it and is happy with how things are turning out, educating staff. So I'm really excited about that reusable foodware ordinance. I'm glad we're going to have consistency across the county. I think that's really a huge part. And leads me into what I also think is a big issue that we aren't quite tackling as well as we can yet, which is the issue of commingling, using, recycling right. And I think we have a lot of room to grow. I was visiting family a couple of weeks ago and flew through Minneapolis, and Minneapolis is one of those cities that does recycling right. They really are a leader, especially in the Midwest. But in the airport was a big, huge full wall billboard with a bunch of fancy actors and actresses on it saying recycling right. We've got to really think about recycling right. And I think as we do more and more organics, that's mandated. As we're talking about what's reusable and what's compostable, we've got to make sure we're not contaminating our waste stream. And that's working with our waste haulers. I wish they could, take everything that said compostable, but they can't. And we have to make sure that we're not, that the public isn't, as we have more bins out there, contaminating the waste stream so that it all is going into the landfill. And I think that's a really big issue, and really appreciate Lisa Clark working with our schools and our young folks, because I think to Supervisor Lucan's point, it's much easier to teach a young dog new tricks. So if we can get them to do it right, that's definitely a great place to start. But I think we just have to, I'd like to see us look at some kind of messaging on that. I think when it comes to plastic, so many just think everything that's plastic is recyclable. And I know when I really took a deep dive into what could be recycled, then it sort of brings into your consciousness of how much is it recycled, and then really looking at how do you reduce those things. So I think those, and I will end with, it's incumbent upon us at the Board of Supervisors, as Marin can, and any other initiative to push for state and federal legislation on producer responsibility. We can't pick it all up on our cleanups. We know that we can't recycle much of it, and we've just got to keep pushing upstream to get producer responsibility and to get the plastic out of the waste stream.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot. And this is an area where, in fact, the state and localities in response have mandated a lot of this stuff, but getting the behavior there is it remains a challenge. So switching gears here to Mary, another, I know, big issue for you is housing. How do we get housing that is equitable, affordable, and sustainable, and in neighborhoods that are compact, walkable, well-treed, and bike and transit friendly? So a short question.
That's the easy one, right?
Yep.
I think to editorial that Paul De Silva wrote in the last couple months about looking at this housing element and really saying, how can we think about housing differently? And that we've got smart, intelligent, eco-minded folks in Marin, and we can do this right. It's not going to look like our housing developments of the 50s, 60s, and 70s. It's going to look different, but we can do it right. It doesn't have to be monolithic. It doesn't have to be all cement. We've got to get creative and look at other communities around the world and, look at best practices. And I hope that with our objective design standards at the county, we've set that in motion, including some verbiage about native plants and, ensuring that what is being planted is the right thing for today's climate, but also tomorrow's. Knowing that we're facing extreme heating events. I think it pains all of us to see a whole bunch of tree plantings go in and then the next year they're all dead. So how do we ensure that that's part of our projects? But we can't meet our equity goals and we can't meet our climate goals if everybody who works in this county has to commute from out of the county, in my perspective. I feel like we have to have a place where, people of diverse income levels can live in a quality setting, can raise their kids. And we know that, they're here contributing to our community. How do we make it so that folks can live here? So I'm excited about the opportunity. It is daunting. The housing element process was painful. The numbers that are part of that housing element are extreme. My hope is that they will get us off of 0 new affordable units to create some. And we're also going to be hearing more and more every day about the Bay Area Housing Finance Authority that I think will have a measure on the 2024 ballot, which really looks to put a whole bunch of money into this. And the further I get into the housing conversation, mixed income is tough to pencil out. And, the term pencil out is hard, but the county doesn't build housing. We support it. We put 25 million into our housing, affordable housing trust fund so that when projects do come up that can create affordable housing, we can support those. But at the end of the day, we aren't the ones building it. So how do we, how do we get together to support it financially, but also as a community? I really feel as though the tides have turned, and when we see good projects, how do we support those as opposed to just focus on, how it may impact our commute? Or I think we really have the opportunity to make our schools and our communities better when people aren't commuting in and out. So I could go on further, but I will leave it at that and would love to hear Supervisor Lucan's take on housing.
Thank you. I'll jump in here and try not to repeat any of the great comments and words that Supervisor Sackett shared. Big picture on housing. I'm optimistic at where we are as a county. When I started in public service on the city council back around 2011, there was a lot more animosity around housing in general in the county, at least that I experienced. We were coming out of the Great Recession. A lot of home prices were significantly lower, and there was just a lot of, I think, consternation around housing, affordable housing in general. I do feel like things have shifted. It's unfortunate that it took the median home price in Marin hitting $2 million last year, and a family of 4 making $150,000 qualifying for affordable housing. It took some of these astronomical numbers where I think sentiments start to shift that, housing is not this big bad boogeyman that we all need to be afraid of and scared of. And I'm actually really pleased with the county's housing element and some of the innovative things that we put in there that will overcome some of those barriers to build housing, while at the same time introducing a form-based code so that maybe we do get a better design and better livable communities. The one thing that I'm a little nervous about when we talk about housing is there's been a significant amount of new rules, new laws, changes at the state level that have yet to really play out. And I think a lot of these rules, laws, changes really benefit the developer. And that could be either be good or it can be bad. It all depends on the developer that you get. And if we get a developer that knows our community, is going to be here for some time, is building a reputation, they want to be good partners, it can be really good. If it brings a developer that wants to maximize everything they can under the rules and they don't care what anybody thinks about it, and they say, I'm entitled to do this, I'm going to do it, then that could be problematic for our community. But along those things, what I'm hopeful that we can do to address this very first question, how do we achieve housing that is equitable? With all of these changes that really benefit the developer, my fear is that we're going to get more and more and more rental housing and less affordable ownership housing. And I don't think we really address the equity issue if we don't have more ownership opportunities for below market units. And my fear, and I don't know how we address this, how we solve it, maybe how we incentivize it, but a lot of these changes are great because it's going to result in housing getting built. But we don't actually address the long-term equity issue and the building of generational wealth if we don't have more ownership units. And I think the way the rules are being adjusted, there's going to be much more benefit to just build affordable rental than affordable ownership. And I think that's part of the equation we need to look at. And maybe with the affordable housing dollars that we have here locally in Marin, do we provide a greater incentive if somebody's going to build affordable ownership units, which I think when you're talking affordable ownership, it also tends to address some of these other questions that you bring up here, as opposed to just, a long-term, hold and manage, apartment complex for many, many years. Lastly, I could probably go on and on and on about ADUs. I think they're a very important part of this question. And it also creates affordable options, sustainable in existing neighborhoods. You provide affordable housing in, maybe predominantly single family home neighborhoods. And I think that's a significant benefit for those that are living in the units and also the owners, but we don't have time to do a deep dive on ADUs today.
Okay, thank you. We are getting close to the end of this initial discussion, and I would encourage everyone, I'm seeing some stuff about housing, in fact, cropping up in the chat. So I would encourage everybody to think about what you want to contribute to this discussion when we wrap up here. So the next question, Eric, really focuses, moves from how do we reduce climate change to how do we address the impacts. So how do we prepare for sea level rise, for wildfire, for heat waves, for drought, and for other climate impacts here on the local level?
Yeah, I think Marin has been at the forefront of this, but it's one of those things that the more you dive into these issues, the more you truly understand the impacts, it sometimes has the reverse effect of, oh my goodness, I had no idea it was going to cost so much. How in the world are we ever going to do it? So we do, we've done vulnerability assessments on sea level rise and are ahead of the game in that regards, which is great. But you end up with a dollar amount that is so huge that it's, where do we go? How do we even start with this? Wildfire, the creation of the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority is great in addressing this, and the work that we're doing in creating fuel breaks and dollars for home hardening, all of these things that we're doing are phenomenal. But as we do this research, we're learning more and more how great the need really is. And climate impacts, we're seeing more and more extremes on either end of the spectrum, and how do we design our infrastructure to accommodate those extremes? How do we design our reservoirs to capture significant rainfall events that exist over just 2 or 3 days, as opposed to maybe a more steady rainfall event over a full winter season? We need to adapt to plan for these extremes, and it's not going to be cheap. And at the same time, these are projects that need to be done. I think as an elected official, that we tend to think in 4-year increments, because those are your typical term lengths. It's going to take folks like myself and Supervisor Sackett and others to say, we're going to start making these investments now, and they might not be realized for 10, 15, 20 years from now. And it might not be popular to spend those dollars now, as opposed to addressing maybe an immediate, this is an immediate concern, but it's going to take some time before maybe it's viewed as, that was a really smart decision that they spent $25 million on this thing, and the community doesn't see the immediate benefit of it until many, many years to come. And that's a challenge as an elected official, to be able to look long term when you've got a lot of pressure for, you know, the immediate now.
Okay, great. And so Mary, how do we prepare? And are there ways we can prepare that also help reduce reduce the causes of climate change? I'm thinking of like sea level rise you were talking about before. Restoring salt marshes can sequester a lot of carbon. Looking for ways things like that are win-win.
Yeah, so I want to just give an update that I believe this fall you'll be seeing a request for proposal that's really going to be focused on bringing together internal and external efforts, including interjurisdictional on sea level rise, and so that we can find that what's the best concerted, most effective way forward and path forward to address some of these challenges. So look for that to come in the next couple of months from the county. Taking what we've done at CSmart and Bay Wave and just saying, how do we move that forward? To Supervisor Lucan's point on, how do we start paying for this incrementally now? I think many of us have heard from Chris Chu and really working with the public works directors in each of our jurisdictions to say, when you replace that, culvert, look at that culvert that may be a $4,000 job now, and how should we look at that for the life of that culvert, and plan and pay for those incrementally as we're replacing infrastructure. I just think we can't wait until it's all a problem and replace it all at once. But every time we replace anything, that analysis, and I know that was created out of the Bay Wave, sort of a checklist that should be looked at, and sort of what is the future, what's lifespan of this infrastructure, and what do we think, what are our climate projections telling us about this infrastructure as we go forward? So I think that's how we start to pay for it. And then we know there's these, huge ticket items that we're going to we got to get prepared. We have to understand what the science is and line ourselves up, for whatever opportunities for funding we can, and think creatively there. And really looking at this community informed sea level rise feasibility study that's happening in the city of San Rafael with the State Coastal Conservancy and the Marine Community Foundation as an opportunity to deeply engage the community in, this work, and where do we need resiliency centers. And, we've got a couple examples coming up from Novato Library, I think Fairfax Library also, looking at those short-term resiliency centers for heat and so forth, but also, how can we help people prepare and plan for what's to come. So I wish I had a silver bullet answer, but I think it's going to take everything to really prepare for this.
Okay. Well, in those centers, no doubt will be heat pump centers, so you get a win-win there also. A lot less greenhouse gas being produced. Okay, well, thank you for that. I've got just a wrap-up question, and then we'll move on to Q&A. And the wrap-up question is, if you could summarize by describing how your climate and environmental priorities relate to other priorities that you have as a supervisor. What are the other opportunities and challenges facing Marin that have some connection to climate as well?
Do you want me to start?
Yeah, I guess you're up.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So as I said at the beginning, I think environmental justice has to be part and is part of my decision-making on every decision we are making. Mm-hmm. Make sure we're not doing harm, not doing more harm, and leaving this world in a better spot than when we began. I'm excited that the board joined on with the Justice 40 initiative just a couple weeks ago. And that's the federal initiative to aim for 40% of federal infrastructure dollars to be directed towards disadvantaged communities. I'm not sure what that's going to directly mean for the county, but I think we're taking the step to say, you know, how do we put our dollars where we haven't in the past? So to me, it's in every part of my decision making. Use less, have a little impact, and leave the natural environment in a native, healthier space with all of our decisions.
Okay, thank you. Eric.
I think Mary said it well. I think, you know, going back many years, you might find environmental projects or climate related projects maybe a little more compartmentalized. And, you know, you'd have your transportation projects and your climate projects and your housing projects, and kind of compartmentalize everything. And we did that a lot, just how we organized city government and county government by departments. And some cities or towns would hire a sustainability person. And, you know, I think early on that individuals looked at, okay, everything climate related, this person solves within the organization. I've seen it evolve now where not just looking to one person or one compartment, but now we're viewing this a lot more holistically. And I see that in this, I saw that in the city of Novato. I see that here in the county of Marin, that even though we have experts, you know, like our Dana's and Gretchen's, but they're really helping to bring these issues to the forefront of every decision that's being made at the county. And that's how I try to look at it as well. You know, it's not just what are my 1 or 2 or 3 climate priorities, but in everything that I do, in every decision that I make, am I looking at it through with this lens? Am I looking through things through an environmental lens, through an equity lens, through, you know, fiscal impact? You know, all of these things are interrelated. For those of you that track city council agendas or county agendas, you know, there's typically that fiscal impact blurb at the very end of the staff report. And I know some jurisdictions have then added a climate impact or an equity impact. And I think that's all good. I'm not knocking that and having all those different analysis, but I try to go through that in every decision I make as well, in looking at all of those different impacts to ensure that we are, you know, certainly not making things worse, hopefully not just maintaining the status quo, but we're actually seeing progress in these areas. And I'm seeing much more overlap with climate and environment in all of the decision making we do. And I think that's exciting. It means that our whole organization is looking at that and not just relying on 1 or 2 people within the organization to be that litmus test. So I think we're in a good place, but we have a long way to go and a lot of work ahead of us.
Okay, well, I really appreciate your thoughtful and thorough responses to these questions, and I want to open it up now to the rest of the room. And I'm going to call on some folks who have added to the chat, and just would again ask that you be succinct in your question or comment. Belle, I know you've been anxious to talk about insurance. Belle Cole. Yep. Uh-oh, you're unmuted.
Okay, now, is that all
Yes.
right? Okay,
Yes.
Hi, thank you so much for that really impressive presentation, both of you, really good. This is the lingering question, and it's getting a lot of attention, but I don't know if it's on the periphery or how strong the Board of Supervisors or how serious they are looking at the issue of the insurance crisis that is unfolding, and it affects us a lot because of the catastrophic climate change that we experience in the periphery of Marin, and in Marin is a possibility. And what insurers are doing, which is pulling out because of costs or whatever the ration. I don't want to go into the details, but I'm sure you face it. And I just like to know, I know that Assemblyman Conley has a committee, a select committee, I think, on wildfires, and is even having a hearing today. And I think the insurance issue is there. And I just wondered where the Board of Supervisors were on this. I know that Marin Wildfire, MWPA, and many are thinking about it. I just like to know where you are. Thank you.
I'll just jump in really quick. Bill, great question. I think it is starting to come to the forefront more and more. Personally, in District 5, I have not received a call or contact from anyone in District 5 yet, saying, you know, I can't get insurance for whatever reason. But I do know that is happening. And I think that it will become more and more on our radar as we start getting more and more of those personal calls and contacts within the areas that we represent. At a higher level, you know, I'm hearing it in other sectors, not just individual homeowners. We had the Sam Dulcini from the Farm Bureau come before the Board of Supervisors not too long ago, and he said that for the agricultural community, they are not able to get insurance anymore, or the costs are going up 2, 3, 4 times to making it infeasible for our ag community to continue. That's a huge concern. In District 5, we have the Nosfield Airport, and I was just talking to the business owners there. Even things like their, you know, insurance for their planes, they are starting to get dropped. They're not being able to get insurance, and so it's a much bigger issue. But you know that you know, individual homeowners, our ag community, our airport community for the public safety element that they provide there, it's bubbling up more and more. And you know, I'm looking as a supervisor, what do we do? How do we give, you know, our state legislators everything they need from a local level to go and really fight that battle at the state level?
And I'll just add, you know, I did get a letter this week from a homeowner in Lucas Valley. He and his wife are in their 80s, and they were just canceled because an aerial drone footage said that their roof was not compliant, and they think that the drone footage is inaccurate because they had replaced their roof, but can't get through to anybody on the phone to get the insurance reinstated. So I think it's, you know, from those little stories to these, you know, much larger stories with the insurance industry. It's a behemoth.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, incredibly complicated to solve. I also think back, you know, when we were talking about sea level rise kind of at its infancy, we were thinking, like, when is the insurance industry gonna start looking at this as well? And I think now we're seeing they're looking at it and they're just saying, cancel it, we're out. And it's going to be greater minds than my own who are going to have to figure out what's the incentive to get them back into the game. And that's beyond my skill set, but I too am, you know, that constituent. I reached out to Assemblymember Connolly and said, what can we do at the state level? I don't think insurance is something we can do at the county level, but we can certainly make that case and share those stories and support legislation as it's proposed and coming forward.
Okay, thank you. We have another question here related to the difficulty of multifamily units dealing with some of these transitions. Laura Lovett, do you want to pose that question?
That was a comment I just wanted to put out there, because living in a condo complex, we find that you know, rules and rebates and initiatives are pretty much stacked against us. Every place I turn, it's not fair. You know, they put a surcharge on our trash hauling. Well, they put one for every, you know, we have 11 units and they gave us 11 surcharges, but of course the trash guys only come once for all 11 units. So, you know, we're paying extra. And for the water district, the same thing. Multifamily houses have almost no exterior watering allowance. You immediately go into the higher tier when you start to use more water. And their answer was, well, you know, we assume they don't have much landscaping, but condos around this county some have very complex landscaping, and we certainly, you know, so again, we're being pushed into the higher rate just by the way the rules are written. And, our complex has, for instance, 4 retirees who are generally on fixed incomes, and we can't be carrying these extra for everybody. I just think it's something people do not think through. The people who are in condos and in rentals do not have the same kind of income as single family homeowners. And, especially if you want to do electrification and solar water heating and EV charging stations, et cetera, it's much more complex when you're dealing with a homeowners association, and the rules have to be written so that it makes it as easy and as, optimal as possible before you'll get all those people on board. It's a much more complex decision-making process. And as soon as there's big hurdles like that, it comes to a halt. And that represents a big chunk of our housing.
Okay.
Laura, I really appreciate that question, and I think it is something we can all do better at, and we can, talk to county permitting and planning, because, again, as we look at our housing, what we hope comes out of this housing element is good projects that are, more akin to a homeowners association than single family dwellings, I think. And so how do we get this right? It's imperative. I think one of the things we can do is look to other areas. There's other areas of the state. And my brother, who lives in Santa Monica, just told me this week how he got EV charging in the garage of his condo of 8 condos, really, and how helpful and easy it was. So I'm going to reach out and say, what did they do and how can we replicate that? And it's bringing the issues to, each of the agencies' attention. And I recognize there's so many agencies, that's a lot, but we have to figure this out going forward, that there's not a preference for single family homes with yards.
Eric, anything to add to that?
Just super quick, Laura, thank you for raising that issue. It's unfortunate that that's how it is, because you would think multifamily condos, that's an opportunity to introduce electrification at scale. I mean, you could go in there, you can do project, you can do solar, you can address 50 units all at once instead of trying to deal with 50 different individual, single family homes. You would think it would be easier to do that, but in fact, it's more complicated. It ought to be the other way around.
Okay, a couple of more questions here. Bernie Samet has a question related to energy audits.
My point was, I feel that inertia inhibits a lot of people from making improvements in building electrification. In other words, how much is it going to cost if I do insulation, if I do solar, if I do a heat pump? And I think one of the ways around that is if folks in Marin knew more about energy audits and what they could provide, they could get and used an energy audit, they could learn where they could get the most bang for their buck. That's my main point. My secondary point was, in a lot of instances, doing those improvements may, in fact, based on the energy audit, not cost them money. In other words, it's sort of like a pay-as-you-save program, or sometimes in various utilities or community choice aggregates, they offer tariff on bill financing. In other words, the audit shows you that you're going to save $100 on a particular project. Well, the utility involved, or the community choice aggregate, will only charge you about $80 a month until it's paid off. And so you make the improvement, you get the benefit of less greenhouse gases, and and you wind up spending less money, and it doesn't cost you anything. That's the theory. Has any thought been given to a county ask for tariff on bill financing? I don't think that the county could be doing it. It's something that MCE might be willing to take on. In fact, I think they tried it as an experiment a few years ago and only had one taker. And just as a historical note, in this country, there are over 110 utilities, residential, investor-owned, or co-ops that offer tariff on bill financing and have done so for years.
So Eric, do you want to jump on that one?
I like the tariff on bill financing. I know, several years back, PACE financing, had come out for, on your property tax bill, but then that also introduced a bunch of, third parties that came in, and sometimes it was a good financing option and other times not so much. I haven't looked at that program for a while, but I think creative financing is needed in this, and a lot of times it does pay for itself, but you need somebody that can provide that financing, because I think I alluded to earlier, if anybody's tried to do any sort of home improvements with a home equity line of credit lately, you're paying, probably close to 9% on that, just given the current interest rate. So finding other ways to finance these projects is key. I love the idea of audits. Let's find a way to do that. The audits that the Wildfire Prevention Authority has done I think have been very successful, but they have crews of individuals canvassing neighborhoods and knocking on doors, and could we ever finance something like that? It's an interesting model, but a great idea.
And I'll just add, to your point, it's really complicated, and we oftentimes don't know the true price of something at the outset. And it's also hard to get an apples to apples comparison of bids, frankly, because they, will encompass so many different things. So I dropped in the link to Electrify Marin, which is really what you can pull as far as rebates and so forth within Marin County, and always encourage people to take advantage of the education workshops that the county has. Electrify Marin, Drive Clean Bay Area on the electrification piece as well, to say, kind of what are the rebates that exist? How do we do this locally and get experience? But I think PACE didn't pan out so well because, frankly, there were some bad actors who took advantage of that program and people, unfortunately. I think there's room for something like that. I'm not familiar with what MCE had piloted in the past or how to make that work, but I think there's opportunities. I think there's also opportunities to, for us at the county level to just always look at what are the rebates that exist. Is there opportunities to stack those rebates? And that's one of the reasons why I love Drive Clean Bay Area's emails. They're always like, these are the rebates that are available today if you're looking for an electric vehicle, because it changes and it's complicated, and each one requires a different application process. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to improve and streamline if we want mass adoption, because right now you got to be really, really, committed, and frankly, committed to the cause and climate. The economic reality may or may not be there quite yet, especially with the unknown. So I think we can do better.
Peter, if I could, another point.
We need to move on, really. So maybe if we circle back, but for now, I want to make sure those who have put a question up here get a response. So Alan Edmondson has a very specific question.
Well, as you're aware, for California to make its huge energy transition, we need a huge amount of new infrastructure to be built really rapidly. And there's a proposal for a battery electric storage system at Ignacio. I wondered, I'd like to hear your positions on whether you support that and your reasoning behind it. Thanks.
I could jump into that one because that's in District 5. Alan, if you had asked me that question 2 weeks ago, I probably would have said, well, we have a pending application. There's nothing I can do. I can't really comment on it. But that application actually expired. So it's at this point, it's not moving forward. I don't know if it will come back, and I probably need to be careful on, prejudging any project, but at a high level, I would say, excuse me, really fascinating technology. Always wanted to learn more, but that was probably a very not a good location that was chosen for a variety of reasons. What I am interested about battery electric storage systems in the future, and actually I just asked Sebastian from Marine Clean Energy about this yesterday, is the co-location of battery storage with solar, either at any new solar arrays or existing ones. He said for Marine Clean Energy, anything over 1 megawatt that they're doing or will be doing in the future will certainly include battery storage. I think co-location makes sense because you've got the solar right there, and you typically have space underneath for battery storage. Storage is going to be key moving forward, but it's new technology. Anything new sometimes concerns people, but I don't think it's insurmountable. Finding a location for those systems and where they need to be along the grid and the major transmission lines very much limit oftentimes where they can go, and just fewer options of where they can be located. But it's really fascinating technology. I would hope that we see more public implementation of it. I know there's a lot of private interest in these battery storage facilities. Well, if there's a private market for it, why aren't we doing it through public agencies as well?
Okay, and Mary, if we can leave that one in District 5, is that?
Absolutely. I don't have anything to
Okay.
add.
I just want to wrap this up. We have one very straightforward and answerable question from Wendy Callens on how can we make solar more affordable?
I think first and foremost, we can make it easier to get through the process. We can make it easier, to permit. But I do think we always have to look at with solar, are we partnering it with battery? Because from my understanding from MCE that we have, an abundance of solar at the moment. So how do we partner that with battery? But as a start from the county level, I think it has a lot to do with streamlining the process to get it approved, making it straightforward, letting people know at the outset what are all the costs and so forth. I think whenever we complicate things, we make them take longer and be more expensive.
Okay, Wendy, does that?
Well, let me just add a little bit to, context to that, because I try to just add more panels onto my existing system. And because of the regulations, I was going to have to reapply, and it was going to cost me so much that I couldn't do it. And all I wanted to do was add more panels. So I think that's part of what Mary's talking about, streamlining the system, but also, if you have an existing system, why do you have to start all over again? And also the utility tax that is now being floated around is pretty scary. And I'd love to get a response on that one if either of them are aware of it.
Wendy, on your last question, I've heard it. I think I've seen a couple of headlines, but I in no way have an answer or am educated on the issue on the utility tax there. But I could certainly do a little more research on it, or if you have any information, please send it my way.
Okay, I'll forward what I have.
Yeah.
Okay, and maybe our final question here, Piper Primrose raises the idea of requiring that parks be natural grass, basically, not plastic carpet. Any thoughts about that?
I went through that battle at my kids' elementary school. I know it well. I know what my opinions are. I know, but I also understand funding and so forth. I mean, the thing that jumps out to me is it's plastic and it gets really, really hot. So I don't think it's ideal. I think the conversation was even harder when we were in an extreme drought, Because playing fields are incredibly important to our community and we don't have enough of them. And so when we see playing fields that are that we can't use, 6 months out of the year, and I'm thinking of the pickleweed fields because of water and so forth. I think this is really an equity issue and, my Terra Linda neighborhood, I would like to say heck no, but I think we also have to consider, if this means that kids can't be outside on those fields or that they can't be used, we need to weigh that as well. So for me, it's not a one-shot answer.
Okay, thank you for that. Oh, Eric, did you have something to
Oh, I
add?
was gonna say, similar boat. It's not a categorical no, under no circumstances. Dealt with this a lot in Novato. We would get one drop of rain and, the fields would be closed for the whole weekend. The rest of the month, 4 months out of the year. We need recreation opportunities for our youth. I still get out and play soccer myself. There's nothing better than natural grass, hands down, no question about it. But just given, city town financing, school district financing, the ability to maintain fields, it's just, until we come up with a dedicated revenue source for natural grass fields, communities are going to have to make this tough decision. And I think oftentimes they err on the side of youth being more active and recreating. And that's I support that as well. But I know it's a hot button issue.
Okay, so I really want to thank you guys. Thank both Supervisor Lucan and Supervisor Sackett for a really thorough and interesting discussion and responses. Much appreciated. I'm a big fan of local government, and you guys are a great demonstration of the sort of quality that goes into making decisions that really are in the best interest of the whole community, and particularly on this really critical issue. So thank you for being here for this time, and thank you for your ongoing leadership.
Thank you for the invitation. My pleasure.
Okay, and you're happy to stay. We're gonna, yeah, applause is in order. Okay. We're going to move on to hearing reports from what various groups represented around this screen are up to and doing. And we have an uncharacteristically large amount of time for that. So I'm appreciative of that. And I want to make sure, I know a couple of you are sort of squeezed for time. So I'm going to start with Annika, if you could introduce yourself and report out.
Sure, absolutely. I'm Annika Osborne. I'm with Cool the Earth, and also I'm on the board of Sustainable San Rafael. So I'm actually wearing 2 hats today. So first I'll talk a little bit about Sustainable San Rafael. We have our annual garden party coming up on Sunday, August 6th, and we'd love for any of you and all of you to come and join us for that party. I will put my email address if you guys are interested and you haven't received an invitation. My email address is in the chat right now. Please feel free to reach out and I will send you the invitation. You can also go to Sustainable San Rafael website and find information there. And then also Cool the Earth and Ride and Drive Clean. We are in the midst of an EV discount campaign that is going to go through this month. And actually, I think we're talking about having it go through the month of August as well. We have some really, we work with our partner, Cartelligent, and they've negotiated some really great discounts on 3 EVs. We might add a 4th EV, one of the Hyundais that has bidirectional charging and super fast charging. So look out for that. Reach out to me also if you're interested. And we also have a couple of great events coming up here in the near future. We have an EV and e-bike show in Fairfax coming up on Sunday, August 27th from 10 to 1. We'll have a bunch of EVs and e-bikes and lots of local owners. And then we have another one during National Drive Electric Week on what is that, September 30th at Bon Air Shopping Center. So look out for more information from us and reach out if you have any questions.
Hey, thank you, Annika. And Kate Powers, I wonder if you're ready to report out on some MCL initiatives.
I am. Thanks, Bill. I'm going to just share a couple of slides really quick.
Oh, okay.
If that's okay. Let's see. Okay, I just wanted to let everyone know that MCL is preparing comments on TAM's Measure AA and Measure B strategic plans. Both of those strategic plans are going to be coming before the TAM board next Thursday on the 27th. And we have commented before on TAM's strategic plans, and particularly around the lack of emphasis on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. There has been progress through the years, but still feeling like the strategic plans are not meeting the urgency of the situation that we're all experiencing right now with the climate emergency, and that there's a cost to delaying action on reducing greenhouse gases, and that it's important that our decision makers really take initiative in revisiting plans in light of new opportunities and new challenges and new data that's coming up. And so just wanted to quickly bring this up in case any of the groups that are present here would also like to make comments on the plan. Unfortunately, they were released on June 22nd with a 30-day public comment period. So the comments are due this Saturday. This is from the recently released Marin County-wide electric vehicle acceleration strategy, and just shows that if we're trying to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, transportation is critical. This is the amount of greenhouse gas emissions that are produced from passenger vehicles. And so Measure AA and both Measure AA and B strategic plans are under review right now. This expenditure plan for Measure B was just passed by the TAM board, adopted by the TAM board as amended. The only call out for expenditures on EVs is in Plan B, is in Measure B, and it's a very small amount. So this is the strategic plan, while the expenditure plan is the voters' priority list and is a high-level policy. These plans allocate the funding, our policies that allocate the funding, and there's performance goals in Measure B, but we're going to be recommending that they're also in Measure A. So this is just a slide that shows you that what sectors Measure A is, Measure A is allocated to, and EV infrastructure, charging infrastructure and EV rebates are not in this particularly. It's possible that they could be part of local infrastructure maintenance and improvement, but that'll have to come from our decision makers to make that recommendation. This is for the Measure B funding, and you can see here that 25% of the funding in element 3 goes to crossing guard program, commute alternatives, and alternative fuels infrastructure. The alternative fuels infrastructure money did pay, and some of that money did go to pay for the recent countywide electric vehicle acceleration strategy. So that is the strategy. And what came out of that strategy is just drawing your attention to electric vehicles need to be integrated with the options for other forms of transportation for a sustainable and equitable transportation system. And while we want to encourage biking and mobility and walking, transit use, and shared transportation. We also have to face the realization that EVs are the way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions for that large portion of our population that is going to continue to use single occupancy and cars to get around. So these are just some of the actions, and I encourage you to look at, if you want to comment, look at the electric vehicle acceleration strategy that was just produced. We'd like to encourage TAM to look for ways to meet some of these actions. So increasing community outreach and education. At our last meeting, which this plan was presented by Christine O'Rourke, there was some conversation about more funding for Cool the Earth. They have a really good strategy and plan, and a proven way of reaching customers in Marin County. Accelerate public charging infrastructure, and looking for, one way that, one thing that came up is who's mapping out who's doing what in Marin County in terms of accelerating charging infrastructure, both MCE, PG&E, Transportation Authority of Marin, and other sources of that, mapping it out, looking for where there are priority areas that need attention, and then focusing funding in a way that there's multi-benefits to the funding, and it doesn't have to be a zero-sum game where it comes out of just Measure AA funds and something else is not funded. And then a couple of the others are, looking for TAM strategy and how it can more effectively increase fleet electrification and support future policies and funding and accelerate EV adoption. So I'll just stop share there. I just encourage all of you, I will be, have not finished a draft of MCL's comments, but we will be sending those in. And if any of you would like to reach out to me, I'll put my email in the chat, and I would be happy to send you MCL's letter and any resources that you might want, links that you might want, to urge TAM to increase their funding support for EV.
Okay,
EV Thanks.
okay. Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay. This also, I would point out, is an opportunity for advocacy at TAM, but also for individual jurisdictions. All the towns and cities have been, given a copy of this EV strategy and asked to choose from the menu of recommendations that Kate was going over. So an opportunity there also. Wendy, you have your hand up.
Yeah, hi, thanks. I wanted to report out from Sustainable Marin. We had a robust response to our request for signups for our rapid response network for the climate. And we've got 60 signups right now. I want to thank the people. Hang on, let me get out of the sunlight here. There, that's better. We've got 60 people who have signed up. Thank you to those organizations who did help us every time you put something out in your newsletter or just sending out the invite. We got a few more signups from that. I'm going to put my contact in the chat, and if you would be so kind as to, if you haven't already sent out an invite, I can send you the invite. And what we're doing is we're going to form these people into teams for each town. We do have 3 chapters, San Rafael, Mill Valley, and Novato, and we're going to be working with our chapter heads next week on determining how we're going to plug these people in. The whole point of this is we're all looking for more volunteers, more people to show up to support policy initiatives, people to write letters, people, and people are looking for ways to get engaged and involved. And I'm happy to say we've had a lot of young people who have signed up. So the other thing you can contact me with is if you have some initiatives that you need some help with, we can send some people your way. And then finally, some of you have already been contacted. We're going to be putting out a newsletter, and the newsletter will include whatever initiatives are ongoing so that people can plug in. So with that, I think that's everything I wanted to say on that. I just wanted to also tell people that on September is Transit Month, and there is some planning going on to have an event in the North Bay. And if you're interested in getting involved with that, then again, contact me. And I'm just now going to put my contact information up.
Okay, thanks for that from Sustainable Marin. And I'm going to go next to Belle and then Jody after Belle. You're muted.
I think it's okay now. Yeah.
Yep.
Good. I just wanted to report on Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority, but in particular, the Ecologically Sound Practices Partnership is having a meeting on Tuesday, August 8th, 2 to 4. And the subject is going to be fire smart landscaping and ecologically sound practices. And we have some veteran master gardeners and people from UC Extension speaking, and it should be really interesting. And I'll put the Zoom address, the Zoom invite in the chat. And I hope if anybody's interested, just join in. And also wanted to report on the Marin Biomass Project, which came up today. And because we have more progress, we have what is called a collaborative, Marin Biomass Collaborative, with over 30 people, stakeholders throughout the county on every aspect of the subject. And they'll be meeting tomorrow and reviewing a chapter of the report from the consultants on utilization pathways. Very interesting. And it's a methodology that many others might be interested in following, is how to get input early on in a process like this as to what the impacts, what people really think of the results of the research. That's tomorrow. And I just want to mention one other thing, and that is, I don't know if any of you follow Fire Safe Marin, but they have a newsletter, their July newsletter, and you can get it from Zoom. I'm sorry, you can get that from you can Google it, and they have just so much interesting information on heating here in Marin, and specialists with every will visit every house. They talk about help is on the way for inspections, fire safe inspections, and it's really worth reading. So thank you very much.
Okay, Jody.
Hi, everybody. So quick report for 350 Marin, and then the Climate Action Committee. For 350 Marin, just on the national and global scale, I want to mention, people may be aware, but September 20th, there's the UN Climate Ambition Summit. There's going to be a big march in in New York City on the 17th, and possibly some local actions, or at least Bay Area, if not Marin. A global day of action on the 15th or 17th of September, another one coming up at the first week of November. So just things to watch out for on that scale, that we may have events locally. We're seeing if we can put those together. I just also want to congratulate anybody who had anything to do with the purchase of the Nicasio land for the Miwok folks. I know some of you worked hard on that. We were able to make a very tiny donation, but that's a very important step that's happened in our county. Our interns that we have working with us this summer, Lucy and Catherine, have been hard at work. They wrote a really excellent white paper on, speaking of energy audits. They came up a bit ago. There's some great information about in there. We're going to be circulating that probably through the BE squad and maybe the collaborative for climate action committees. and putting together a flyer. Energy audits are actually required in California. If a buyer requests it, then it has to be provided by a seller. So we want to start to get that information out, as well as rebates. The town is looking at a potential, well, there's the Bayren rebate, but also maybe a local rebate to help people move toward energy audit, so they can start to figure out how to address the whole issue of electrification. Also, they're working on the interns a white paper on low carbon concrete, and how town operations, city and town operations could adopt resolutions or make this part of their procurement policies, because we think that's very important. As Annika mentioned, we have the EV car and bike show coming finally. It's going to be across the street from Good Earth on the 27th, 10 to 1. Some of us have worked a long time to make that happen, so we're really excited about it happening. Also, on the climate action front for Fairfax, we're working on an event September 13th at the library with Quit Carbon, also about how to move toward electrification of homes. Also, the resiliency centers, the Fairfax Library and Pavilion, are on a track to move in that direction. And I just found out last night at our event, we've got 2 multi-unit developments in Fairfax that are interested in potential orange outlet pilots. So lots of good stuff happening on that front. And I'll just, on a somewhat more personal note, but activist note, mention I listened to episode 205 of Optimism and Outrage. If you're not familiar with it, Christiana Figueres and others do that. That one is on how to talk about climate change so people will listen. John Marshall. Some of us have heard him before. He can't say these messages clear enough, especially around equity, that we need to change our language for certain, for audiences to get more people on board and understanding what climate change is, the fact that net zero is a terrible term because people don't want to go to zero. There's lots of really important information on that podcast. So if you're interested, check that out, episode 205. I think that's it for now. Thanks very much.
Okay, great information. Really appreciate that. One tag on, or a couple of tag ons for Sustainable San Rafael. I see that Annika did add something to the chat that our membership party that she mentioned is August 6th, garden party outside. And our honoree this year is Cyan Dandridge of the Strategic Energy Innovations, and has done such great work. So we're honoring her as a sustainability hero this year. There are other issues going on in San Rafael. Northgate, which has importance for the whole county, really. Great new town center being devised there, and still ways to improve it. So that's going through this review process right now. Also, the downtown transit center, which will be the main transit center in Marin, is starting its design work, and a number of folks are from our organization and others are involved in the review of that. And finally, electrification. The county's process for a countywide electrification plan, which the grand jury called for a year ago, is kicking off with a meeting in early August. So that's getting underway as well, and will be really something that MCL and Sustainable San Rafael and others will be tracking on over the next few months. So we end up with a really great plan to address not only the new construction, which was teed up last year and many jurisdictions have adopted, but also, very importantly, existing buildings, since that's our main housing stock. How do we get those electrified? So that's going forward now as well. So any other reports? Have we missed anybody who wants to add anything? Okay. Well, with that, we have an opportunity to end 5 minutes early. I thought it would be earlier, but hey, we're here, and great discussion. I really appreciate everybody participating. There will not be a COG meeting in August. Okay. So, and we do have a new time zone here, which is this one, which is what, 10 o'clock on Wednesday? And help me out, which Wednesday of the month is it? I have no idea.
Third
Third.
Third Wednesday, yeah.
Yeah,